Good afternoon, bon après-midi. Bienvenue, welcome to the National Managers Community Managers Connect virtual talks, organized in partnership with the Prairies Official Languages Committee to celebrate the second edition of the Prairies Linguistic Duality Week. Je suis Kathleen Gagné, coordonnatrice régionale de la concertation interministérielle à patrimoine canadien à Winnipeg, and I'm also the coordinator of the Prairies Official Languages Committee. S'il vous plaît, veuillez noter que cet événement est enregistré et un lien sera fourni aux invités après la session vers le vidéo sur YouTube. Please note that our event today will be recorded and a YouTube video link will be made available to registrants following our session. We ask that you please click your screen to mute your microphone and turn off your camera if you haven't done so yet. S'il vous plaît, cliquez sur votre écran pour désactiver votre microphone et éteindre votre caméra. For today's session, we will be discussing leadership in linguistic duality with our special guests from the Prairie Federal Council, Mary Frances Wright and Brigitte Gibson. La conversation sera animée par la gestionnaire régionale de la CNG des Prairies et des Territoires du Nord-Ouest, Lisbeth Savard. I know we're all looking forward to an engaging session, so without further delay, je vais céder la parole à Lisbeth pour présenter nos invités et lancer notre session.
Merci Kathleen et puis bienvenue à tout le monde. Good morning and good afternoon to all our participants from coast to coast. Merci à tous et à toutes de nous joindre pendant cette semaine de la dualité linguistique des Prairies pour cette importante discussion sur le leadership et la dualité linguistique. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the NMC Managers Connect virtual talks focusing on leadership and linguistic duality. Nous sommes très chanceux d'avoir avec nous aujourd'hui Mary Frances Wright, directrice Santé Canada Edmonton et co-championne de la gestion des talents, Conseil fédéral des Prairies, Director Health Canada in Edmonton and Talent Management co-champion at the Prairie Federal Council, et Brigitte Gibson, directrice générale régionale de patrimoine canadien à Winnipeg et championne des langues officielles au Conseil fédéral des Prairies, Regional Director General, Canadian Heritage in Winnipeg, and Official Languages Champion, Prairie Federal Council. So the virtual talks are just one of the several ways that the NMC is working to engage over 40,000 managers and aspiring leaders across the country on topics of importance to you. Les conversations virtuelles est un des multiples moyens que la CNG rejoint plus de 40 000 gestionnaires et aspirants gestionnaires à travers le pays et couvrant les différents sujets qui vous sont importants. Donc, before we begin, I just want to note that this obviously is a bilingual session et nous vous invitons à vous sentir libre de poser les questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Donc, avant de commencer, vu que c'est la semaine de la dualité linguistique, j'aimerais ça commencer par poser une question, Brigitte. Alors, dites-moi, quel mot est-ce que vous trouvez difficile à prononcer dans votre seconde langue officielle? Puis ensuite, je vais passer la parole à Mary Frances.
Pour moi, je veux dire, ma deuxième langue, c'est l'anglais. Alors, de façon quotidienne, je me trouve plus ou moins à l'aise dans les deux langues. Je m'en fâche des fois dans mes mots en anglais si je suis fatiguée ou si je vais trop vite. Et puis, c'est souvent des doubles R, puis je sais que ça, c'est quand même assez commun. Alors, now I'm going to do it because I'm thinking about it. Brewery, ou rural, des fois. Ou des fois, je fais des Z pour des S, isolated, plutôt que isolated. Des mots comme ça. À l'écrit, j'ai toutes sortes de choses qui m'accrochent, mais en tout cas, on parle de français oral, alors I won't go there.
Moi, je suis pareil avec les R en anglais. Là. Moi, c'est Rory. Oh là là. Puis, vous, de votre côté, Mary Frances?
Oui, pour moi, c'est la même chose. I'll be the copycat. It's those double R's. So, like the French word for surgeon, chirurgien. C'est un exemple pour moi. Merci.
Oui, bien, c'est ça. Hein. C'est drôle, les R en anglais et en français, ça nous pose des problèmes. OK. Alors, on va commencer avec la première question. Et puis, justement, Mary Frances, je vais commencer par vous l'adresser. Donc, the public service must continue to look at opportunities to strengthen its diversity and to create an inclusive culture that is committed to learning and excellence. So it's critical to our ability to serve Canadians, to attract the best talent, to address challenges, and to lead by example. So increasing the use of both official languages and creating an environment where all staff feels comfortable to use the language of their choice is foundational to this goal. So my question today is, can you share some strategies that you have used in your own department that work well for you? Donc, je vais poser la question en français. Pouvez-vous nous présenter des stratégies que vous avez utilisées dans votre ministère et qui fonctionnent bien pour vous?
Oui, bien sûr. So thanks for that question. I'll just give a quick bit of context. So I'm a national director and I have staff across Canada. Some of them are in designated bilingual regions and some are in English-only regions or unilingual regions. And my Francophone employees are in the minority, about maybe 20%, 25% are Francophones. And so it's critical that I model the use of both official languages through my interactions. So for just a couple of really practical examples, when I'm setting manager agendas and all staff meeting agendas, I put French first, and they're always bilingual agendas, of course, but I put the French language first as a bit of a signal. And instead of just saying, here are the slides, you can find the French slides in the folder or in the invitation, I actually produce bilingual slides side by side so that the language is treated equally, and it makes it easier for me to go back and forth in both languages. A couple of other things that I like to do is I start those meetings in French to really try to go above and beyond to show, like, it's not a token thing, it's equally important. And then I always answer the question in the language in which it was posed. But I recognize that while all my Francophone employees are in bilingual positions and know English, lots of my Anglophones don't know French. So I'll answer fully in French, but then I'll provide a quick summary in English of the question and the answer to be inclusive. So those are just some of the little tips that I've adopted through the years.
Oh, that's great. I really like that. Those are really good tips. Thanks for sharing. Brigitte, est-ce que vous avez quelque chose à rajouter?
Yeah, I took a bit of a different take on the question and focused for my answer a little bit in sort of creating an environment for staff. So, opportunities like the ones and the mechanisms that Mary Frances describes are right on in terms of sort of creating an opportunity and an environment that's comfortable for people to then sort of interact in the language of their choice. Sometimes too, I found in our organization that it's been helpful to do things that are less formal to sort of take away some of that, to make things feel a bit less threatening. So, activities that might engage people, oftentimes, at the Department of Canadian Heritage, we're fortunate in that we interact a lot with the minority language community, their clients, or we'll have partnerships and those kinds of things. So present us with opportunities. Sometimes it's about food. People love food. So sometimes that creates an environment that then allows people to share, or creating opportunities for conversation and raising awareness with official language minority community organizations. So collaboration, whether it's bilingual staff members that have that awareness or use that to be able to create a dynamic. So that's something that we've found that just allows people to feel confident, and then you put into practice some of the mechanisms that Mary Frances has described. It just they kind of go hand in hand, I think.
Ouais. C'est bon, la nourriture, c'est un grand rassembleur. Hein? It's always a good way to get people out. Yeah. OK, merci. OK. Alors, la prochaine question. Pardon, là. OK. Je vais poser la question à Brigitte. Alors, c'est donner le ton est un outil de changement des comportements importants. La direction et non les règles exercent une influence indiscutable sur le respect et l'inclusion. Donc, la question pour vous, Brigitte, que recommanderiez-vous aux gestionnaires de mettre en œuvre dans leur équipe pour créer une culture de respect et d'inclusion par leur leadership? Donc, la question en anglais. What are some suggestions for managers to implement in their own teams to create a culture of respect and inclusion through their leadership?
So from a leadership perspective, whether you're a manager, you're a director or DG, for me, it's the lived example. Alors, c'est quand même assez évident, mais il faut premièrement vivre l'exemple comme leader de choses que vous voulez mettre de l'avant, démontrer une culture de respect et d'inclusion en faisant ça. Alors, une ouverture de l'utilisation des deux langues dans la façon que vous démontrez, même si l'utilisation de deuxième langue n'est pas parfaite. Sometimes it's difficult, to sort of demonstrate your use of your second language if you yourself are not finding that it's something that you can perfect or that you've perfected or that you're confident in. But I think sometimes that sort of vulnerability to be able to sort of put yourself out there as a leader is something that then can be, you sort of show yourself to be willing to try. Alors, un genre de sens d'humilité, de se montrer vulnérable, c'est pas facile, mais je pense que c'est important. Si vous n'êtes pas bilingue, de vous affirmer comme leader en appuyant des activités que votre personnel bilingue pourront faire. So to affirm, even if you're not someone who uses the second official language, but to be supportive of activities that are taking place in your workplace or amongst your team. De toute façon, c'est d'encourager des pratiques qui permettent l'utilisation de la langue. Alors, une patience, une ouverture, pour les gens de se pratiquer, an openness for people to practice, to create that environment. You need to create the space and the time also. Sometimes it takes time. It takes more time. So to be able to do that. And aussi pour mettre en vigueur de façon organisationnelle des attentes. Une culture organisationnelle qui permet cette sécurité linguistique. L'ouverture d'esprit, d'incorporer des éléments peut-être culturels auxquels j'ai fait référence dans ma première réponse. Et genre, des fois, ces liens-là culturels permettent aux gens d'avoir ces expériences-là de façon différente. Those sort of cultural elements allow people to live the language a little bit differently. As a manager, to implement some of your own practices, for myself, like Mary Frances talked about, meetings or bilats in the other language, sending emails, formatting emails in a particular way. Be purposeful in your use of your language, of your second language, and make your intentions known. I'll have a day in my office where I'm just speaking in French. Everybody knows it. So that is just the way that we'll function on that particular day. Management meetings, for example, that would take place in one official language or the other, and they're scheduled that way, that sort of thing.
Yeah, lots and lots of food for thought and lots of good strategies there. So thank you for sharing. Mary Frances, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, how could I add? That was such a great answer.
Yeah.
But I'll just underline that, when we look at the kinds of challenges and problems we are trying to solve through our programs, they're complex problems, and we can't afford not to have every voice included. And so that spirit of inclusion is critical to ensure everyone can really express themselves fully. And so maybe just a few other examples, really small personal examples are when I know someone's first language, I start the conversation in that language to respect them and to model that. And then in meetings, when I turn to them, I'll turn to them in their language and let them choose which language they want to respond in. But it's a way of nodding and saying, yeah, I know that what's your first, and I want to create that space where you feel welcome to use it if you choose to, but of course never forcing it. So those would be the only small examples I would add to that, and that can include small talk in the kitchen, just showing that you're happy to interact in a language that people personally prefer, and then people pick that up as well. So that's another dimension. Thanks.
Yeah, those are really good strategies. La vulnérabilité en tant que gestionnaire, et puis taking that first step and taking that opportunity to speak to that person in their first official language. I think that goes a long way in showing respect as well. Okay, so my next question, and I will direct it to Mary Frances. Donc, les gestionnaires sont la ressource la plus importante de notre transformation organisationnelle. Et les gestionnaires doivent explorer les possibilités qui viendront accélérer le changement par le recrutement et par des cadres de gestion des talents dans cette communauté. De quelle façon les gestionnaires peuvent-ils influencer le changement en ce qui concerne le recrutement et la gestion des talents dans les deux langues officielles? Donc, la question en anglais, what are some ways that managers can impact change when it comes to recruitment and talent management in official languages?
Okay, so I might think of this from the two levels, recruitment. I think the new directions in staffing have really freed up the opportunities for managers to bring in fresh talent we can open competitions to all Canadians now, and we don't have to go through 2,000 applications. We can actually pick a screening strategy. We can say, I'm going to take 1 out of every 10, and that's it. You know, we really are much more open now in terms of all of the options that we have as hiring managers. So I think that's an important way of getting access to bilingual populations. Also, I really encourage my staff to hire as often as possible students, undergraduate and graduate students, because it gives you a chance to sort of try someone on, but also exposure to people, you know, who have been in, you know, immersion programs, etc., or maybe bilingual for other reasons. On the talent management side, obviously, it's important to support language training goals. That won't come to a surprise as anyone. But some of the more interesting strategies I've used are office exchanges, where I allow an employee to travel to another office and work either for a week or a month in their second official language to really deepen their vocabulary and give them those social opportunities as well to expand. And then the other piece is sometimes it's critical to actually advocate for full-time language training for your employees, because people really struggle to access those programs. There's limited resources. And when it comes to talent, if we're serious about giving people opportunities, we have to support that intense training that will get them their language level. So I've also used that strategy. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thank you. Brigitte, quelque chose à rajouter?
From my perspective, agreed as well with the use of different staffing mechanisms. We have some flexibility we can exercise, and we should be using it. From our perspective, at Canadian Heritage, where we have a significant number of bilingual positions, and so from a recruitment perspective and for people who are in the organization, language learning is often long-term. It's a long-term goal. So the time to have the conversation is not opening the doors that the second language offers you, and having that conversation is not to have it when the person is applying on positions, and I'll restate that again later, but it's to establish kind of organizational expectations early. When the person is sort of arriving at that point, whether you're recruiting into, particularly from a talent management perspective, it's not time to start having the conversations. So we often, either when we're recruiting people or inside the organization, we'll start talking early about language learning and what that and what the requirements are, what kinds of things people should be thinking about if they're interested in moving up, whether it's in the department or in the public service. And sometimes that's a full-time language training opportunity and something that we may want to set goals to, but sometimes it might be a longer term sort of language training plan that we could have with someone. It's never too early to sort of start having that conversation, I think. The other thing that sometimes we'll do, exchanges are super interesting and bring a lot of value, or having people, recruiting people, sometimes using some of those mechanisms from a community perspective and have an exchange happen that way. It brings both language and culture into the organization. So there's different creative things I think you can do.
Yeah. So that just makes me think, we're probably all itching to go back into the office to be able to do these things, right? It's certainly tricky. But I mean, this is a great segue to my next question. So access to language training is definitely a hot topic in the public service, as we've just talked about. So there is no government-wide policy which sets out who receives access to language training, the amount, or the format. These decisions are delegated to deputy heads and are implemented differently across the public service to address the needs of each organization. And we know that might look different for each organization. So in that light, what would be your advice to employees who want to improve or maintain their second official language? Donc, la question en français, que conseilleriez-vous aux employés qui veulent améliorer ou maintenir leurs acquis dans leur deuxième langue officielle? Donc, Brigitte, je vais vous poser la question en premier, et ensuite, Marie-France, vous pouvez ajouter.
Alors, comme on a dit avant, pour moi, c'est jamais trop tôt de commencer à avoir la discussion. Alors, aux employés, discutez-en avec votre gestionnaire. Je veux dire, que ça soit quelque chose que vous visez à long terme, ou si il y a une progression de carrière que vous anticipez, quelque chose qui vous intéresse, un domaine en particulier. Gênez-vous pas non plus d'être évalué. Il faut savoir où ce que vous êtes dans votre capacité linguistique. Des fois, les gens, il y a une certaine crainte, puis je comprends, c'est pas facile, mais il y a des outils là pour une raison, pour être évalué, pour ensuite être capable de savoir où ce que vous êtes rendu, par quel bord vous devriez vous prendre, que ce soit à l'écrit ou à l'oral. Il y a bien sûr qu'il y a de la formation, il y a des programmes de formation, on a fait de toutes les sortes au ministère. Il y en a qui se font très bien à distance, dépendant de la façon que tu apprends. Et puis, qu'est-ce qui vous convient le mieux au niveau de votre niveau linguistique? There are all kinds of different learning mechanisms. Some are virtual and are well suited to some learners. Some are not, and I know currently it's not obvious to be able to do an in-person learning experience, but I think that on the other hand, educators and organizations may be challenged to be providing things more significantly virtually. Informal opportunities are important too, des occasions informelles, des films, de la musique, de la lecture. Profitez de ces choses-là qui sont disponibles. Use informal opportunities as well. And when lots of people in an organization express an interest, or if you have colleagues, sometimes the training dollars go further if you're a group, whether it's virtual or ultimately if we're in a position to be back in in-person settings. So, be creative with some of your colleagues sometimes, or in an interdepartmental kind of way. Sometimes that works as well. And all of those opportunities, could conceivably be done virtually.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, good point. Okay, and I think the official languages community that Kathleen is part of is a great place to kind of connect into as well, for sure. So Mary Frances, anything to add to this?
Well, yeah, once again, she gives these great answers. But I'll just say, je vais souligner l'idée de l'initiative. C'est essentiel that, people take the initiative. So CBC Radio was my favorite one for building vocabulary. And a couple of things that have come up in my teams recently. In the Quebec region, a number of staff are trying to maintain their English levels. So they just invited their colleagues across Canada to join discussion groups where they talk about work topics, but in English, in a safe place where it's intentional. We're here to practice. And likewise, in my management team, I've got two trying to maintain some levels. So they've started a coffee break in French, and that gives them a safe place to practice. And then my other favorite one is just like reading departmental memos in your second official language. It's a great way to pick up on the technical vocabulary of your workplace. I remember the first time I had to write my language test too many years ago to say, and that was one of the best things because in my schooling, we never learned associate deputy minister in French or any of those government words. No. So it was the best thing was just going through all the memos and, okay, I don't know that word, and looking it up. It was a great self-study technique, so it worked out. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's a good point because government has its own set of language. That's for sure.
You thought you're bilingual, but guess what?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so well, that brings me to, I'm kind of sad to say it brings me to the end of my questions. So thank you. I think both of you, Brigitte and Mary Frances, you shared such great insights and tips that managers can really use, and it'll definitely help them and all of us to be better leaders. So at this time, I'm going to pass it back to Kathleen as we open the floor to participant questions. Donc, s'il vous plaît, posez la question dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Please feel free to ask your question in the official language of your choice. Donc, Kathleen, à toi.
En effet, donc vous pouvez vous servir du clavardoir pour inscrire vos questions. Donc, please type your questions in the chat, meeting chat function box that you have on Teams. I'll wait for your questions. In the meantime, I'll ask one then. À titre d'employé bilingue, on est bilingue, par exemple, dans des régions unilingues au fin de la langue de travail. Comment est-ce qu'on peut créer un environnement de travail qui est un petit peu plus bilingue dans ce type de région-là? So, maybe I'll I'll ask the question to Mary Frances. So how could bilingual employees in unilingual regions of work could help create that environment?
Absolutely. So for years I was a bilingual employee in an English region, and one of my favorite things was to reach out to anyone I knew who speak French and just speak in French with them. Just because there's a designated language doesn't mean that you can't really enjoy using both official languages and then create that environment for others. So that's my best advice. If they're bilingual, go for it. If they're not, obviously, it's going to make people, you're not going to be able to communicate. So just use your language as much as you're able to.
Okay, that's good. And I have a question that kind of links into it. Comment est-ce que les employés peuvent appuyer leur gestionnaire pour s'assurer que les langues officielles minoritaires aient une place dans le milieu de travail? Donc, appuyer leur gestionnaire.
Je vais prendre cette question-là, si vous voulez, Kathleen. Appuyer la gestionnaire, je veux dire, je pense que d'être prêt à apporter des idées créatives, je veux dire, le gestionnaire, de son côté, peut démontrer, créer une culture organisationnelle. Je pense que les gens ont souvent beaucoup de bonnes idées. Amène ces idées à votre gestionnaire. Prenez l'initiative si vous êtes prêt à animer un café, faire une suggestion de lecture. Oui, c'est toujours c'est au gestionnaire qui devrait démontrer quand même un comportement pour l'organisation, mais en même temps, je pense qu'on est toujours ça nous fait toujours du bien quand on a des idées, on a du monde qui vient nous voir, qui peuvent initier certaines choses. Donnez du feedback aussi à votre gestionnaire. S'il y a quelque chose qui fonctionne bien, on aime ça le savoir. Ou si vous trouvez qu'il y a quelque chose qui pourrait être amélioré, ou les gens participent, mais il y a des petites craintes ou des petites choses qui vont moins bien. Amenez le feedback parce que des fois on ne le sait pas non plus. Alors c'est important de pouvoir amener ces suggestions-là, je pense.
Good.
Oui, et je peux peut-être ajouter quelques pensées, juste au niveau personnel. When I was an employee working in Ottawa, and the managers were trying very hard to have bilingual meetings without any translation, without any backtracking to repeat ideas. And I had some colleagues who were, English was their second language. They might be working on French as a third or fourth, but they had a hard enough time. And I often would sit next to, I always had one person that I was like I would call it a whisperer, where I would just quietly either write down what was being said to make it possible for the manager to run a bilingual meeting and to ensure this employee could be included. I wasn't asked to do that. Of course, we don't actually formally ask people to do that. But I've had other situations where my colleagues was from Quebec region, and we were at a national meeting, and she was still learning her English and had a really hard time. And again, I just chose to sit next to her to make it possible for the meeting to run, but also for that employee to be included. So people can go above and beyond and create the workplace that models inclusion to support your manager. I know that's not like an official thing. We never ask people to do that. But we all have that ability to make this a great workplace and to go above and beyond. And those are just some examples that people can do on their own.
And if I can just add to that, because that reminds me of the job that I had previous to when I came to this position. We were a virtual team like we are today, I guess. And so one of the nice things that you can do when you have an MS Teams meeting, you could put those things in the chat instead of whispering or writing them down. So that just brought that to mind, Mary Frances. Thanks for raising that. A really good strategy.
Mm-hmm. I have another question here. Let's read it. How do you manage written documents when you have team members that are unilingual? For example, someone wants to prepare written documents in French, but 2 or 3 members of this team are unilingual English. And just to add, that could be something that happens more and more as we have more virtual teams sometimes across the country, across different departments. So how would you manage that?
Well, From a written document perspective, I guess it will depend on the document and the length of the document. I think as much as possible, I know particularly documents that have been, that are meant to be shared widely in our environment. Canadian Heritage is a department where a lot of things are done a bilingual way, but we're in a unilingual region. We make a deliberate effort when something is being distributed to all staff that it by default gets distributed bilingual. So there's a certain investment and a commitment that comes with that. I think if it's a bigger document, if it's a policy document, if it's not possible to translate things, you could do a summary of the document in the other language to provide to people with a commitment to having a bilingual format sometime down the road if it's something, or if it's a draft, to make it clear that it's a draft with a summary, and then again with a commitment perhaps that the bilingual version or the final version be distributed in a bilingual fashion. Or a more informal process where you might have a colleague that might read the document for you and then provide you with a summary if it's not something that's available in written format right away. Those just offhand, those might be some ways to go about it.
Good. Anything to add, Mayor Francis, or that's complete?
Yeah.
Good. So I think that's all the time we have for questions. Donc, j'aimerais recéder la parole à Lisbeth pour le mot de la fin.
Okay, parfait. So yeah, I mean, this was so much fun. I love talking about official languages. So thank you so much to both of you, Mary Frances, Brigitte, and merci à Kathleen. And thank you to all the participants for joining us today to mark the Linguistic Duality Week here in the Prairies. And of course, Linguistic Duality Day tomorrow, September 10th, across the public service. Donc, encore une fois, merci beaucoup d'avoir pris le temps de répondre à nos questions, d'avoir partagé vos connaissances et puis vos conseils. Moi, certainement, il y a beaucoup de trucs là, que je vais ramener là, puis que j'ai noté. Alors, c'est excellent. Merci beaucoup. The information and the tools that you shared today will definitely be helpful to all public servants as we try to lead ourselves and our teams through these challenging times. So again, thank you to Kathleen and all of my teammates who work behind the scenes here at BNMC to help coordinate this event. Donc, je te remets la parole.
Oui, pour un petit mot de la fin, merci tout le monde de votre participation. Merci Lisbeth pour nous avoir guidés à travers cette conversation. Encore un grand merci à Brigitte et Mary Frances for being with us today and sharing your insights. I didn't take notes. I intend to watch the YouTube video and take notes. So there are 2 other activities left to celebrate our linguistic duality this week. Tomorrow will be the national webcast, Official Languages in the Era of Teleworking, organized by the Council of the Network of Official Languages Champions and the Canada School of Public Service. And speakers will share their thoughts on the challenges created by telework and the opportunities not to be missed, and also what it means for the future of the public service. And finally, if you want to get a snapshot of the main parts of the Official Languages Act that could especially apply to Prairie region with this lens, there will be a WebEx session on demystifying official languages in 30 minutes on Friday morning in French and then in English. So if you want more information, please check the Prairies Official Languages Committee GC Connects page for more information. N'hésitez pas à vous joindre à ces autres événements. Until then, best wishes, everyone. Bonne fin de journée, bonne semaine de la dualité linguistique et à la prochaine.
Merci beaucoup.
Oui.
Au revoir.